Good morning. Good morning. Sorry, we're starting a little bit late. It is Tuesday, April 21st, the day before Earth Day, and it is 9:05, and the meeting's called to order. I'm Felicia Marcus, the chair of the board. With me are, to my left, Vice Chair Fran Spivey-Weber. To her left, Doreen Diadamo. To my right, Board Member Tam Dodek. And to her right, Board Member Stephen Moore. Mr. Howard, who's assisting us today?
Thank you. Assisting the board today are Janine Townsend and Courtney Davis, and to my left, Chief Counsel Michael Laufer, and to my right, Chief Deputies John Bishop and Karen Turgovich.
Terrific. For those of you who don't know, in this building we have an emergency evacuation procedure that's pretty simple. It's just look for the exit nearest you. If you hear an emergency sound, grab your stuff, grab your friends, proceed cautiously outside the building. We gather near 10th and J. If you want to hang out with us, then you'll know when the all clear sounds, and can come back in with us if you like. The meeting's being webcast and recorded, and that just, there are a couple of things. One is, whether it's webcast or not, turn your sound makers on stun or silent, or turn them off. And when you speak at this microphone, it's important to get close to it, not touching it, because that creates static for anybody listening over the web, and which makes radio people who are trying to record it crazy. So for their sake, don't get too close to it. But for everybody else's sake, don't get too far from it. So the trick is to just be within a few inches of it, because we may be able to hear you up here, but we want to make sure that the folks in the back can hear you and folks on the webcast and the recording can hear you. It's easier said than done. So if you don't get it right, Tam or Fran will help you with it, because I'm hopeless. That's why I have a different one. Okay, with that, we're on to the public forum. Public forum is when people can speak to us about an item that is not on the agenda, and we have one public forum card today from Libby, I think it says Yuramovic? Yuramovic, thank you very much. Citizens of Beaumont? I just heard nice things about Beaumont, so great.
Me?
I just heard nice things about Beaumont the other day.
What did you hear nice about Beaumont? Everyone would like to know from the water board.
Huh? What?
What did the water board hear nice about Beaumont?
Beaumont was trying to grapple with the issues that they're dealing with in a creative way. So now you tell me what you think as a citizen of Beaumont.
Beaumont is trying to grab onto their issues. 20 years ago, a group of men came into Beaumont and have pillaged the town. I spoke to you a few months ago. Beaumont was supposed to have recycled water in 1995. They do not have recycled water today. The water board set a deadline of December 30th, 2014 for the city of Beaumont to have Title 22 compliant water. The deadline passed. It wasn't even mentioned in council. On the 30th, the state had another deadline that the city had to submit a plan for a brine disposal. And on the 20th, they brought it to council. Let me tell you, this city knows they have problems. There were 3 incumbents up for election, and they were all voted out of office. So we have a brand new council, and there are 3 new people. They are fully aware that there is a bad problem. Kurt Burcham, who runs your Santa Ana Regional Board, stood up at council on the 20th of January and told them, your deadline's in 10 days, you have to sign the papers. Council told them, we don't even know what this is. It's not even realistic. These documents don't look legitimate. And basically, Burkle told them that you have to sign it because your deadline is up. Since then, there's been no discussion on it. The bottom line is Beaumont never put in a state-of-the-art recycled water plant or anything. They just embezzled the money. In December, their 2001 wastewater bond was called because they had embezzled all the money and never built a facility. There is not going to be any funding for Beaumont to put in a brine line or recycled water or anything. But the regional board is just ignoring this. They canceled their March 15th meeting. They have another one on May 1st, and Beaumont's not even on the agenda. They're just completely ignoring it. Beaumont rejected their 2014 financial statements because they were materially misstated and fraud. The auditors stood up in council and said sewer machinery and equipment is really just a catch-all, and they never actually built. They never put any machinery and equipment into the sewer plant. The Beaumont Basin Plan came out. The safe yield on the Beaumont Basin Plan is 6,700 acre-feet. Beaumont Cherry Valley last year alone used 11,921 acre-feet. Beaumont's percentage of the Beaumont Basin is only 32,000 acre-feet. They're going to be out of water in 2.5 years. They have a serious problem. Council knows they have a problem. Council fired the city attorney. The law firm of Akufi Waisaki had been in there 20 years. They orchestrated the 2003 adjudication of the Beaumont Basin, which allowed them to overdraft the basin for 10 years, and they never built a recycled water plant. So these people are in a horrible problem. They are about to run out of water, and a lot of these people don't even know it. This council needs the state to step in and help them. They need backing up, because you know what the city's manager says? The water board doesn't say anything to us. The auditor stood up and said the Board of Accountancy said we're fine. And you're leaving these councils, these state agencies are leaving these councils without any backup. You guys have to force that Santa Ana Regional Board to do their job. They know that Wildermuth Basin Plan, that is just fraud. It's just rigged numbers. Anyway, I have given you the call documents and the transcript from the January 20th council meeting, so you can read what the councilman asked, and Burkhold basically just told him, like, you got to sign it because your time is up. It's like I said, Beaumont knows they have a problem, but Burkhold needs to work with council and not that corrupt staff that they've been working with, because this has to be taken care of.
Thank you. I think the council part is what I heard about. Thank you for flagging it, and we will.
So if
Go ahead,
I could, I'm actually the liaison for the, that region, for Region 8. Yeah, so do you have your contact information there?
I do. I'll give you my card.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm going to be down there next week at that meeting, but they have to step to the plate. They can't just ignore the city and let it go.
At the meeting on, I'll be at the
May
one on May
1st.
1st. I'll be there, so we can connect. All right, thanks.
That's what public comment is for. Appreciate it. Next, we'll consider adoption of the April 7th and 8th board meeting minutes. Do I have a motion or correction or question?
With one small correction, which Ms. Townsend is aware of, I will move for adoption of the minutes.
Second?
Aye.
Aye.
Next, we have a series of uncontested items, items 2 through 8. Do we have any cards for items 2 through? All right.
I will also move adoption of all the
Second?
items.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Though, may I take this moment? This is actually the first time I've seen Bethany. Is it, welcome back. Welcome back. We did manage to adopt the trash amendments in your absence with the assistance of Stacy Gillespie, but you were missed, and obviously your contribution to that effort is invaluable, so welcome back.
We're on to item number 9, California's drought emergency. Bill, I just want to give you some advance warning. I'm going to be asking you about the blob.
Good morning. I'm John O'Hagan with the Division of Water Rights, and I'm going to give you a brief update for transfers and curtailments. Pending water transfers that we have before the division include the consolidated place of use of the Central Valley Project and State Water Project. This transfer requests exchange or transfer of over 335,000 acre-feet of water. A notice was posted on April 6th for this transfer, and comments are due today. If no comments are received, we should be issuing an order by April 27th. If we get substantial comments, then of course that will delay that decision further.
Transfer was it? I was distracted by the picture.
It's
trying to
the
figure out where it was.
consolidated place of use for the Central Valley Project and State Water Project. The next two transfers, they're kind of on the same track, are the Garden Highway Mutual Water Company for 7,500 acre-feet to the state water contractors, and then the Plumas Mutual Water Company for 4,828 acre-feet. Both of those transfers were noticed on the 6th, and comments are due today. Again, if no comments are received, then orders will be issued next week. As far as curtailments, at the last board meeting, we identified that the Deputy Director for Water Rights had issued a curtailment order on Antelope Creek for fishery protection. Since that time, on April 17th, a second fishery protection curtailment order has been issued for the Deer Creek watershed. And I believe that affects about 50 water right holders. So those are the two curtailment orders issued subsequent to the emergency regulations. For the curtailment process, we have had meetings with stakeholders from the San Joaquin watershed and also the Sacramento River watershed. We shared our analysis with the San Joaquin River group, which includes the South Delta and Central Delta representation and the exchange contractors. They felt that the Department of Water Resource unimpaired flow calculations could be improved. They thought they had better data. So we were waiting to see if we would get it. They said they would send it to us. We did not get the data, but I did call their representative, and they informed me that they felt it wasn't a big enough significant difference to provide the data, so we are still going to be using the Department of Water Resources full natural flow calculations for our analysis. In the Sacramento River watershed, we met with the stakeholders there. They also identified some deficiencies in our analysis for flows, and then also an issue dealing with the demand data that we are using, the 2014 demand data and the average demand data. Because this year there was some state water contractors that were cut further than previously, they felt that that should be reflected in our demand analysis. So we are looking at that to see if a demand should be reduced for those state water contractors. And we are also looking at the increased potential flows that we are missing in our analysis. In both cases, we plan to be issuing a curtailment notice to post-1914 water right holders in the San Joaquin by the end of this week or early next week. That will affect over 1,500 water right holders. During the same timeline, we are planning to issue a curtailment notice for the Scott River in Siskiyou County. Last year we had issued the same type of notice. Those water rights are under an adjudication, but there's conditions in that adjudication to make certain flows for satisfying senior rights. The flow conditions are below the standards, so we are now going to be issuing that curtailment notice, and that affects over 200 water right holders. In the Sacramento River watershed, we expect to be, by May 1st, issuing follow-up curtailment notices for post-14 water rights in those watersheds. And that would be roughly 2,900 water right holders. And that's all I have. Is there any questions?
Yeah. Where do you think, when do you think you're going to start having to curtail senior water rights holders in the San Joaquin or the Sacramento in the season? How far up, and will you be doing it in tranches of Or what would your increments be?
What we are doing for the further analysis is looking at tributary level demands by senior water right holders, and our analysis shows that in mid-May we'll be likely have to curtail senior water rights in certain tributaries of the watershed and perhaps even further. And the same thing will be going on in the Sacramento River watershed because of inadequate flows. As you can imagine, the Sacramento's a little better off. Term 91 on the Sacramento side has still not been activated. So the curtailments under that are still not in place, but those should be coming in mid-May.
Second part of, I don't know what the time lag is on this. Second part of the question is just when you go up, are you saying you'd be curtailing all the seniors or going up to year X?
It will be
How will you
by
decide?
priority date, and it's similar to the post-1914 water rights. We are going to be looking at the demand and supplies by priority date of pre-14 water rights based on the information that we have in our data set.
Right, so do you think that means you might have it on a rolling weekly basis going further up, or I'm just trying to think of the increments.
I think it
I'm
will.
not going to hold you to it, but just some measure of increment that you're going to be looking at.
I believe that they will be if we do curtail, it will be for the summer season because the supply continues to diminish. So we're at a diminishing supply, but an increasing demand as you go into June and July. So we will be cutting off the tops of those demands by priority as necessary.
Right, maybe I'm not asking this right. Help me, Tom. I mean, it's just, it's like when
I
you've
think
gone
about-
up the watershed to, 1905 or...
On the San
and then-
Joaquin River, I think that at least the supply-demand curves, projections that I've seen at the 90% exceedance, all pre-1914s would be curtailed. Is that approximately correct, John?
Yeah, but by the date,
By the
it's,
summer, yeah.
yeah, it's not a date certain as we move along. We would cut and see how it goes. So I don't want to speculate that all of them will be by, June 1st. I want to make sure that we're being careful and tracking this so that we do not curtail when unnecessary.
But we will do them by tranches, as John is indicating, but if at the 90% exceedance, the supply-demand curves indicate that all the pre-1914s in the San Joaquin Basin would be curtailed during the summer season sometime.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get. They're not all going to be curtailed at the same moment. They'll be
Probably.
curtailed as it goes up. So I was thinking, you're not going to have, if you've got thousands of them, you're not going to be making decisions by every 3 hours every day.
No.
So that's what I'm getting at, which is you'd probably do...
Every couple of weeks, probably,
Thank you.
we
That's
would
my-
put out a
that is my
new,
question.
updated, and
Got
add
it.
new people
Sorry.
every couple of weeks,
Go ahead. Dean. Sorry.
approximately.
Well, but the biggest impact would be the irrigation districts, the larger users. So
That-
whenever that happens, even though it may hit one water right holder, it will affect hundreds, thousands.
Yeah, if a senior water right holder is a major district, which most of them hold prior rights, yes, if we curtail that right, it will affect many agricultural users in that district.
I had a couple of, okay, so could you talk about the relationship between term 91 and post-1914?
Term 91 is
In terms of the dates.
well, term 91 would be in most post-1914 water rights with a priority date of 1969, I believe it is. I don't know what the exact date.
65, yeah.
65. So those would be curtailed right off the bat when we're doing this initial curtailment coming up. So term 91, however, is triggered by a calculation on the project releases of stored water to make delta demands, and that's a different trigger in the delta calculation. So That is coming soon. At the same time we're doing this, they'll probably occur near the same time, but we will be going deeper than Term 91 on our initial curtailment.
And then consolidated place of use, that was adopted last year, that was approved last year as well.
That is correct.
Right, and not that you would be expected to have all this information today, but a little bit on the history of adoption of consolidated place of use. Is it something that comes before us frequently or before staff frequently for approval? Or is this something that typically just comes before the board in dry years?
I know it came before us last year. I'm not sure about previously. I wasn't leading the program in prior years.
I have a vague recollection of it having come in one other year, but it is not something that we do on an annual basis historically. 2009, Michael tells me. Good going, Michael.
There you go.
The historian, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just interested in how your work earlier this year in conducting the information order, gathering that information, has improved our ability to do the demand forecasts and refine this process of selecting cutoff points for the curtailments and the timing of it. Has it improved our efficiency and our accuracy?
We
And
hope that
also
it's
in terms of the documentation of pre-1914 rights, has that part of the information order improved our process?
We definitely have now got dates in which we had ranges of dates, for example, so that improves the priority date that people are claiming. We got good data for 2014, which reflects a dry year situation in which we are utilizing for those 1,000+ parties that got the information order. That's the data that we are utilizing for our demand for those water rights. And you saw in the last presentation, it dropped those demand significantly. And that is to the benefit of all the water right holders. Before we initiate curtailments, it's dropped the demand curve. So we feel that informational order was a great value to us for better information, but also to the stakeholders.
Thank you. I think that's worth highlighting and repeating a lot, that this is our effort to try to make the system more orderly and efficient and equitable. So thanks for your hard work on that.
Could I follow up on that? I know I already went, but thank you. That's a good question. Would you be able to quantify it in terms of amount of time delay for invoking the curtailment?
We could look at that. We don't have that right now because we immediately moved to utilize that data. We didn't look at it. We would be able to put in the existing data that we were going to use before the information and then see what the shift would have been. So we could provide that data.
Okay, I just think, that makes it a little more real for the water rights holders, particularly those that aren't comfortable with the information order. It would help for them to see the actual benefit. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Les Grober. I'm Assistant Deputy Director for Water Rights, the other one. I have a very brief update, and I'm going to introduce staff from the Department of Water Resources and Bureau of Reclamation to provide an expanded drought update in general in terms of the hydrology, state of hydrology, but also the operations under the temporary urgency change petition order. My brief update is following up to the update I provided 2 weeks ago. We had just issued another TUCP order. The executive director issued the order. Two of the key issues at that time were discussions of and receipt of operations plans for New Melones on the Stanislaus and Shasta on the Sacramento. Principally, what are the operations needed to provide temperature control through the summer, but also then answering the water supply issues. It was critical to kind of get to some resolution, so there were discussions, negotiations going on at that time. I'm happy to report that there is provisional agreement and provisional approval by the executive director of plans for the operations of both New Malonis and Shasta. We're waiting now on the submittal of those final plans, some of them delayed from the dates in the TUCP, but the important point is just getting that certainty with regard to how to operate and also water supply and as it affects transfers and such. So these are plans intended to be able to maintain temperature control on those rivers through the summer period. Also, and those plans were prepared in consultation with the fish agencies. We also on Friday received the application, and stakeholders as well. Yes, there were a lot of discussions taking place at all levels over the last 2 weeks. We received the application for the water quality certification for the barriers on Friday, and this is now just for one barrier at West Falls River. In discussions with the applicants and the Corps of Engineers, we're intending to issue a water quality certification by May 4th because there's a need to start construction in May in order to have them in place for June so that the projects can operate consistent with their TUCP adjusted operations for delta outflow through the summer months. And so with that, and if you have questions for me now, or I could ask the department and the Bureau staff to join me up here, and then you can ask questions throughout, or if you have anything now.
A quick question on the barriers. Obviously, that's something, the barrier, something to understand more. Is that something that at some point you're going to show us pictures and slides? Maybe it's even in here. Is that in here? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
For those of us who are graph impaired
Yes.
and like pictures, that would be great.
West Falls River, I mean, doesn't everybody know where that is? Yeah.
I know the Old and Middle River pretty well, but yeah.
Well, and thanks for your hard work, and also to our partner agencies and stakeholders on those processes of fairly rapid, agreements that have been made to react to the challenges of the TUCP and those deadlines. And that was real important to me to see the system respond to what we learned from last year. And I just want to indicate my appreciation for all that hard work to get to this point.
I'd like to chime in on that as well. Thank you and Mr. Howard and all the agencies. And I think that having that, expanding those discussions to the stakeholders, I think really helped. And we'd have a lot more people here today if it weren't for your ability to pull this all together. So thank you.
With that, Bill Croyle, I guess, Ron Milligan, and Drake. And Paul Marshall.
I'm going to start calling you guys the great illuminators. Also, where, is that the Salton Sea? What is that picture?
San Luis Reservoir.
Oh, it's San Luis. Oh, my God. I mean, not so much the lake level, but it's like how brown is. Sorry. When's that from?
Welcome to Mediterranean, California. Right. I'll start. Bill Croyle, Deputy Director for Statewide Emergency Preparedness and Security and Drought Manager for the Department of Water Resources. So as I move around the state with many of you and many others, sometimes I feel like I'm the bad news guy. But we're trying to work through reality on this difficult.
You think we're the good news guys?
It's team ball, right? So, from a hydrologic setting, we'll kind of lay that out. We've seen a number of this before, but I think as we move through this kind of extreme drought conditions, it's important just where are we and what it looks like in the near future. And so, again, I'm going to move through this fast, but I'll slow down, and I'm up for any questions as we move through this. And this is kind of our standard slide. And I think this is important because, as we went through the winter, we kind of saw things kind of improve in certain areas of the state. And then we quickly, after a very, very dry, historic dry January and March, we're kind of back to kind of the exceptionally extreme drought conditions statewide. And as we move through this coming out of our wet season, I think we see these conditions continue to expand into eastern parts of Oregon and southern Washington now, and of course intensifying in Nevada. So we do have extreme drought conditions occurring throughout the West Coast, which is, challenging for all of us, but, as we look for solutions and awareness, I think it's important to go here. One thing is Cal OES is, leading drought task force on behalf of the governor's office, is keeping a really good track on, who is declared, who's in a state of emergency. It does change a little bit from month to month as we kind of get more information with regard who's declared and where those kind of ground zeros are. It doesn't change a lot. I think this slide, I updated it earlier this week, and then with the drought task force briefing that came out late yesterday, one of the counties have dropped off. And so again, it's a very active discussion at that local level on, their existing emergency conditions as it relates to drought. And I think I'd like to highlight, the tribal community is very, very involved in this, and I think it's made a very good connection through the Drought Task Force and all of our agencies to kind of, again, highlight California's challenge here and working together to resolve that. I have to throw this slide in because we got a little color on our next 6-day weather forecast. So this is the QPF that provides us a little bit of expectation, certainly in the high Sierras and potentially some snow. It's not a lot of water in the purple areas, that 1/10 of an inch or so, but we will get a little additional snowpack here over the next couple days, primarily starting tomorrow night. And it's an interesting weather setting we have right now, but at the moment we'll take anything we can get. Yeah, the higher elevations, above 2,500 feet or so for potential rainfall, and then higher for snow. But we'll take whatever precipitation we can get. There's snowpack. Obviously, April 1st was a little rough up at the Phillips Station with the governor's office, or the governor attending our snow survey on bare grass where we should have had almost 6 feet of snow. That was a little rough. We did get a little snow after that, but again, we're coming back down to historic low conditions as we move through April into May. So right now we're sitting, at 3% at the north and the south end of the Sierras, and 5% in the middle. Again, this is important from a runoff perspective into our reservoirs, and so we'll see in our hydrographs in just a minute, we're kind of at our peak in our reservoirs across the state. Here's a graphic that is used to kind of look at, now there's a lot of lines on here. The blue one is current, 76, 77, and 2013, 14 are on there in red. And so we are now historically low, below some of the driest in the history of these snow survey locations in all 3 regions of the Sierras. There's another graphic kind of over time, 1950 to current, on just a comparison, looking at where we're at. So 5% as of April 1st is obviously really rough. Here's our 8-station index. So we'll roll through each of the index areas or regions. Again, this is one of the most important water supply regions, both for Shasta, Oroville, and others locally. And so we did look a little better in December. You can see those big jumps where those big storms came in. Of course, then it dried up a little bit in February. Then we're kind of back into taking whatever little amount of precip we can get in Northern California. And so we're sitting at 33 inches. We're, 50 is average for the end of the water year. And so 75% of average to date. This is the 5-station index. This is one, always think of this one as important to our Central Valley, but also from the east to west water supply for our Bay Area communities. And so we're sitting at 40%, so much less compared to average to date, slightly below 2013-14 as of this date, and just barely above the 1923-94 or 76-77.
Real quick, in this part of the state, I've heard from some stakeholders and experts that the tree ring data is indicating some, on the paleo record, a fairly significant period right now. Do you have any information on that? That historically it's not only the lowest in recorded history, but maybe going back several centuries.
We've just recently came up with a graphic. I didn't include it. It actually looks at some of the multi-year dry conditions or drought conditions, 2-year, 3-year, 6-year, a 10-year time frame, and going back to one of the more historic runoff characteristics, go back to 1536, which is about in a 3-year window is much higher than what we see right now. So if you compare back to the tree ring data at that point, this is about a third of what they saw in that historic 3-year window. And so it does change when you go to a 2-year window, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year window. But that's information that we've been graphing up, and as we go back and speak with our climatologists and our tree ring researchers and try to, again, carry the knowledge that we have now forward with a little different perspective, and certainly comparing to what's going on presently. So we can certainly include that in future briefings if there's interest. Here's our 6-station index in the Tulare Basin. Again, similar to the 5-station, so we're 42% of average to date. As you can see, we're below the 2013 line, 2013-14 line, but above the 1976-77 line. Here's our reservoirs to date. This is as midnight on the 19th. We had, again, these numbers switch around a little bit on average to date just because of the history of those graphics. As an example, Trinity is at 60 if you look at the graphic today. But again, we're looking across the region, in the 60s to 70s with some, in this case, New Melones is on here. It's at 34% average to date. And then there's some other graphics here. I was talking with our hydrology group this morning, so looking at a select group of reservoirs, about 50 reservoirs throughout the state, which is posted up on CDEC. On average, we're looking at about 61% of average to date for about 50 reservoirs. And we're tracking many, many more reservoirs. They get kind of smaller as you look at the 150 list, but we're looking at about 61 on statewide with those reservoirs throughout the region. We're going to go through the hydrographs for some of our key reservoirs that we spent a lot of time talking about, and to the projects and how we manage them and provide information. I think the key is the blue line is our current reservoir elevation and the change over time. You can see again those, I keep wanting a pointer. It's a red line. But I think you can see when you see the verticals. I don't know if that'll, yeah, I need a mouse. But I think those vertical aspects of the hydrograph is where those big storms or the runoff into those reservoirs are occurring. But I think it's important to kind of track where we were last year during extremely dry conditions, but also kind of compared to the 76, 77 period. Now the red line with the triangles, and this will be similar for all the graphics here coming up, is where we kind of came out of the 1976, 77 with a very wet year, 78, 78. So just kind of can see where we're at. In Trinity Lake, we don't quite have as much water in the reservoir as we did last year at this time. Here's Shasta Reservoir. So in this case, we do have more water in the reservoir than we had last time. And you can see where, again, those vertical aspects where those big runoff periods occurred, but it's tapered off now and starting to decline a little bit again with the reduced runoff and limited or no snowpack.
Could you comment on the project reservoirs and what that line will look like as a result of these temperature management and other conditions that where it might look a little different than other years? See how not the blue, but the other lines start to drop down because of release for water supply, I would imagine. So how do you expect these lines to look as a result of the TUCPs?
Sure, I can answer that. Ron Milligan with Reclamation. Bill, can you go back one? I'll talk to Trinity a bit. Based on our current thinking with Trinity, given the Trinity River Restoration Program flow that'll start probably tomorrow, based on, for that basin in the Trinity restoration flow that's characterized as a dry year, surprisingly. So there's a volume of water that's associated with that for the restoration program. So we plan on making that release and in conjunction with bringing some water over to help with the temperature management on the Sacramento. We're looking at roughly the same end of September storage that we see on this graph, so about the same spot as the black line. So we're a little bit less storage, but we're going to come in pretty darn close. One of the things that's kind of up in the air is the last few years we've had some real concerns at the lower end of the Klamath with returning salmon coming in and potential low water, high temperatures, very densely packed fish trying to get refugia in some pretty warm conditions. If we need to release some more water there, that can change that into storage level somewhat. But that's roughly where we'll be here with Trinity.
Change it down, correct? It would change
Probably a little
down.
less than we saw last year at the end of September. But probably our estimates right now, probably within 50, 60,000 acre feet of that level that's there. So Bill, if you go to the next one for Shasta, in our current thinking with Shasta in conjunction with those releases and water coming over from the Trinity system and managing through temperatures and trying to balance outflows and supplies in the Sac Valley, we're actually going to be right about where the black line is again here as we get to the end of September. So we're probably going to be in that 1.1 million acre foot range. We can maybe talk a little bit later about just some of the temperature strategy so we get a better result along with that coming in about the same storage level, but that's about where we're going to end up.
We'll move on to Lake Orville. And at the moment, we're slightly below where we were last year, just across the line at 1.8 million acre feet. 64% average. Folsom Lake, again, slightly above last year's peak, more water at this time, so 83%. And New Maloney's Reservoir, tracking pretty steady, but starting to decline, similar to the last year's graphic of, or the line for 2013-14 at 34%. And San Luis Reservoir. So I think we're able to move some water into that reservoir, especially during the wet period and the higher flows in the delta. And so again, as you can tell now, some of the storage is now being consumed. So we're sitting at 1.3 million acre feet, well above last year on this case. Next couple of slides is kind of, you've seen this slide before, so we have one for San Joaquin Valley and also for Sacramento Valley. This is the one that we had for March, kind of where we thought we ended up, where we did end up in 2014, statistically, and looking at the 50%, 90%, and 99%. And so I think, again, this is in March, and so the next graphic is for April, and you can kind of see the big change that we had as we move much farther down the graphic, and now well below the 2 million acre feet of runoff for the Sac Valley. The San Joaquin, again, this is the graphic for March. So the 50% about where 2014 was, and then 90 and 99%, and then again we'll go to April. So it's continuing to be much lower. And now we'll move on to emergency salinity barrier.
A singular barrier. So you've seen what our hydrology really looks like. The hydrology is bad. It was bad from a matter of precipitation, but the real bad news was really the snowpack. Snowpack is so poor that we really have to reoperate the system in many different ways. In addition to reoperating the system, we have a physical response as well, and that is really this emergency salinity barrier. Now, this is just a poor location map. I do want to say that that red bar is actually a little bit more to the west. So it is really close to that little peak on Jersey Island that you see. The northernmost peak on Jersey Island is where the potential barrier, or the proposed barrier is going in. And this is just a planned view of the barrier. Essentially, the very ends of it, the north and south ends, are in peat soils, so we are driving sheet piles about 80 feet out into the water. The sheet piles prevent us from really loading up the levee with heavy rock, and so it protects the levees both on Bradford and Jersey. And then after that, we'll be loading up rock on out to create the entire barrier. It's very similar to the barriers that we construct every year down in the South Delta. It looks like rock. It's what we call our Flintstone alternative, or Flintstone technology. In this particular case, we do not have any conduits going through this. It's just a straight up barrier because they're basketball-sized rocks. It will be kind of leaky. There will be some movement of water through the barrier. There is not going to be any boat portage facilities at this particular thing. In fact, starting about 1,000 feet back from these barriers, we'll have warning signs and buoys and everything else to be able to say that this is closed. We're also going to be posting this particular closure in marinas throughout the Delta, and a notice is going out, I think, this next weekend, saying that we're going to have this thing closed. As of starting, we'll be closing off the area on May 7th to boat traffic so we can get construction out there.
It's been a while since I've seen the overview of the head of Old River Barrier, but is there a sheet pile structure, a metal sheet pile structure in that one as well?
No, there isn't. The barriers down in the South Delta are in competent soils, and now that we've been building those structures for a couple of decades, the soils are even more competent.
Competent, meaning, stiff, can bear weight. Very good. So, and then in terms of the long term on this, what's the time scale in the short term, and then when you put something like a sheet pile or metal in, what's the long term disposition of something like this?
This is still under discussion with the fish agencies. At a minimum, the sheet pile would remain in through the end of the declared drought by the governor. So we would be keeping them in at least that long. Because it causes so much damage to the peat soils, and the only way of removing the sheet piles is really to cut them off at ground level. What it does is, if we were to have to go back, say in another 5 years or something, to reinstall such a barrier, and we were to pound sheet piles right next to it, then now we're creating more or less a conduit that could end to failure for that particular portion of the levee. So we still have to talk to a number of engineers and everything else about what our best options are off into the future, and see if it's if there's a way of leaving the sheet piles in place, or if there's another way of being able to make sure that the levee is competent later on if we have to rebuild the structure.
Right, and I figured that hadn't been decided yet, but it's one of those things, as an engineer, you like to have an asset if that ends up being the proposed solution that you can use at a later time. So,
It's about $1 million worth of sheet piles. So,
thank you.
is that enough of a graphic for you?
No, that's helpful. I was just looking at my pictures of the head of Old River Bear.
Oh, okay. Last slide is really the delays to potential impacts. So
Going to be my next question. What are the arguments that people, or what are the concerns people have with them, just for people who are listening?
so some of the complaints that we've received from Delta citizens and other recreational interests out there are delays for recreational boaters. Several of the boating clubs have already talked to us, and they said, if we know ahead of time that it's closed, it's really not much of a delay. So people just plan around it and so forth. So we're hoping that that is correct, and there's not much of a problem. We are being told by these boating clubs that they're expecting a lot of the boaters that would have normally taken advantage of several of the lakes in California to be showing up in the Delta at least for one or two recreational days during the summer, mainly because it's the only thing that has water at this point. So that is one thing. It does increase the salinity just west of the barrier. So obviously it's one. That's how it's designed. It's really designed to prevent salinity from moving into specifically Frank's Track. Once it moves into Frank's Track, it starts to commingle with the fresh water there, and then it's hard for the next tide to push it out. The real reason for these barriers, though, is because the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project are going to be pumping so little, exporting so little water during the summer months that their normal knob, if you will, their normal control for being able to maintain that net delta outflow is when they experience a very high tide, an unexpectedly high tide, or when there's additional pumping from in-delta users and stuff like that, and the salinity starts to pull in, what they do is they turn off their pumps to be able to meet that net delta outflow. And that's an immediate knob that they can adjust right then and there, because they're really not going to be having much in the way of exports. That knob is really, really low, and so it can get overwhelmed. And this is an insurance policy, really, to be able to help protect the delta from those influxes of salinity. There's going to be some fish passage issues. We're thinking that it's not going to be that much because it's really not that different for in-migrating green sturgeon and stuff like that. And then there could be aquatic weeds as well, hyacinth.
That's interesting, because I was wondering where the location of those weeds and where they were apropos this. Is the fish passage, sorry, I should know this, but the fish passage issue part of why you're going for one rather than three? Or
no, not really.
for one versus three?
The other two barriers on Steamboat and minor sloughs, really, they were viewed by the fish agencies as affecting critical habitat for the Delta smelt and potentially longfin smelt. And so what we're trying to do is prevent that from happening.
That does ring a bell. When Board Member Diadamo and I toured those areas, there is more developed habitat in Minor Slough, for instance. If I'm just
Yes.
recollection of being there, versus the False River is more of a classic levee, engineered levee setting.
A little ways away from the Delta smelt habitat.
And also where they are this year, right? Okay. Yeah, no, it's interesting. The False River site is kind of from when you look at the models, it's maybe one of the highest vulnerability sites when it comes to salinity control. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's actually why the Frank's Track project was suggested, about 7-8 years ago. So.
In that regard, I don't want to raise any red flags to people, but as we consider long-term Delta plans, is this part of for sustainability and that sort of thing, looking at this particular waterway as an ongoing challenge, and is this part of a possible longer-term solution?
At this point, we don't have any longer-term solutions, or we haven't started really working on that. I know that it's been discussed at many different levels over the past decade, and so there's always that potential to bring it up again. Of course, there are some critical arguments there, against such a structure being permanent, both from a ecological basis as well as from a recreational basis.
Thank you.
Just would like to add, though, that we had received and were processing an application for a proposal that would have put in barriers here and also 2 in the North Delta, intended to put in 3 out of 10 years. So it had been envisioned as something longer term, as needed. But then this one now is just for the 1 year temporary for the drought emergency.